Okay, so I know there's a lot of people who were not able to attend live today. So we're just going to go ahead and record this. And yeah, we'll get started here. Thank you so much for coming to this masterclass, whether it's live or if you're watching the recording. I appreciate you being here. And hopefully we'll share some helpful information. I'm going to try to make this, I want to make it really like digestible for you guys. So I'm not going to try to get like too technical with everything, but my main goal with this is that you can walk away from it feeling empowered and feeling like you have some tools and information to be able to start taking some actionable steps towards hopefully overcoming Candida, or at least taking, the first steps to starting to see some progress with Candida. So before we dive into that, let me just introduce myself. I feel like most of you probably know me. Anya, who's on live, I know you obviously know who I am. But my name is Harmony Patton. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, so that's FDNP for short, much easier. And essentially what that means is that I use functional lab work to find hidden stressors and underlying causes for disease and different symptoms. So for me, my focus really is on the gut, hormones, autoimmunity, and really using healing tools and the power of our health in order to tap into our deepest potential and to live our lives to the fullest, to the greatest of our abilities, essentially. So along with that, I am also really big into doing energetic work and soul work and intuitive work and things like that. So for me, it's never really just, I don't like to just look at the lab work. I don't like to just look at the supplements and the diet and, the basic protocols that you get in a functional naturopathic setting. For me, it's really important that we look a little bit beyond that, because it's been my experience with clients that, doing the diet and the supplements and all of that stuff, we see results, things get better, but to really like take things to that next level, that next step of like truly feeling like you can sort of move on into the next chapter, the next phase of your life. That has really come about to my clients who have been open and willing to explore more the energetic healing side of things, the soul healing. So I love doing like soul guided sessions and stuff like that. So enough about me. I'll talk to you guys a little bit more later about my personal experience with Candida, but I'm really, really excited to be doing a Candida masterclass. I've wanted to do something like this forever, but frankly, there is so much information out there about Candida that I felt very much like it was sort of redundant or wasn't needed in this space. Because there really are a lot of amazing resources out there. There's a lot of people who talk a lot about Candida. And I don't know from the perspective of, those practitioners if they have personal experience with it or not. But the reason that I wanted to start talking about it again is because for me, it's something that sort of resurfaced again after my most recent pregnancy. So I'll get into that a little bit more in a little bit. But first, let's just talk a little bit about kind of like why it matters. Why does it matter if you have Candida, or if you suspect that you have Candida, or really anything to do with your gut. So Hippocrates, way back, I don't even know when, you can find the year online if you want to Google it, but he said that all disease begins in the gut. And I think it's kind of wild to me that even that far back, right? Like this is forever ago. Even back then, they knew that disease started in the gut. And yet modern medicine and even plenty of holistic medicine, we don't focus on the gut. There's really truly so much that begins there, besides the fact that 70 to 80% of our immune system lives in the gut. So that's literally your immune system, right? Your immune system is what fights off disease. It can also, if you have an autoimmune condition, unfortunately, fight and damage yourself. But that's a whole other conversation. But when our gut is off, when our gut flora is off, when there are overgrowth and pathogens and all these things, it truly, truly can change who we are and how we experience life. There's even a book called Grain Brain. There's another one. Anyway, there's another one that's similar to that. That's by the same author. I can't remember what it's called though. And essentially, the gut is the second brain. So the reason that that matters is because oftentimes when we have these things going wrong in our gut, it affects us emotionally, right? It can make us anxious, depressed. So really, truly, it's so hard to overcome much of anything in your life if there is chaos in your gut and if things are not kind of harmonious in your gut. And I'll get a little bit further into what I mean by that. But I think a lot of times we think about like, okay, well then why did anything go wrong in my gut? I'm just living life. So there's so many factors to this. And actually it starts as early as being in your mother's womb. So what did your mother eat while she was pregnant? And then were you delivered via C-section or vaginally? Were you breastfed? How long were you breastfed for? Were you formula fed? And I want to reiterate really quick that there is no shame and no guilt and nothing wrong with any of these things, right? Whether you're a C-section baby that was formula fed or a vaginally delivered baby who was breastfed, there's nothing wrong with either one, but depending on those things, it will absolutely impact your gut from the get-go. And even, for instance, for me right now, because I'm breastfeeding my 3-month-old, and whatever happens for me and in my gut and my symptoms, I'll see it show up in him as well. So it's like your children's guts mirror your own. So for you, as someone who's probably older than a baby, I would assume, I think that's pretty safe to assume, the foundation of your gut and your gut bacteria and what made up your gut started when you had no control over it. So the reason that having that knowledge is important is because it's going to inform you in how to move forward in the decisions that you make. So knowing, okay, like I know I was born vaginally and I know I was breastfed. I was breastfed for a decent amount of time. And I did have a ton of gut issues throughout my life that showed up in so many different ways, including PCOS, infertility, acne. I mean, and this was like the story of my whole life pretty much. And honestly, I had Candida and stuff when I was younger. I just didn't know it. And I'm sure I had leaky gut. But it's interesting because I have a brother who has really bad psoriasis. Like he has had this autoimmune condition for years, and it's intense. And on top of that, he has a lot of really intense digestive issues. And he's worked with a lot of natural doctors. He's, done the natural thing. And he still does, he still follows whatever his last practitioner that he worked with I think he still follows similarly that protocol. He's never done any testing or any working with me, something about your little sister. I guess you just can't take it from your little sister. So it's a little bit of a touchy subject. I try not to, be annoying, will know it all and be like, oh, you should do this. I try not to do that. So I pretty much just kind of keep my mouth shut and try to just be respectful of the decisions that he makes and know that if he wants to work with me, then he would do that. But for him, he, of all of my siblings, has the most health issues. The consistent psoriasis, he's never gotten to a place where he's healed enough to fully be psoriasis free or have zero digestive issues. He literally wakes up in the middle of the night with stomach pain from digesting, and he eats very well. He doesn't eat crazy at all. So, but he, of all my siblings, was the only one that ended up being formula fed, I think at a couple months, and he was vaginally delivered, but he was born very early. So these are just interesting things to know and information to have. And for me, it's interesting to see in real life kind of this playing out, right? Whereas also I have 3 older brothers, by the way. So my other brother, who was breastfed the longest of all of us, he was breastfed until he was like over 2 years old. He has like 0 health issues. And the thing that's interesting about seeing this in a family setting is that we have the same genes, right? We have the same, well, slightly different, but mostly the same genetic makeup, very similar genetic makeup, right? We have the same parents. So we should genetically have the same predispositions, right, to autoimmunity and to all these things. And I have a brother who eats completely like shit and is completely fine. Well, I guess I shouldn't say completely fine because I don't know, but for the most part, he doesn't have anything like big going on. And then I have a brother who eats really well and has been like trying to sort of like heal forever and struggles still. And that's because of, you know, what you start with absolutely can inform what's going to be the case for you. So knowing this, it kind of can also give you some grace and take some pressure off of yourself. So you're not completely like, oh, you know, there's something wrong with me, because there's so much of that comes up, I think, when we deal with symptoms and health issues, is feeling bad about ourselves, feeling like shame and guilt and like, oh, our bodies are failing us, or why will my body not just do what I want it to do? Like, why am I not getting better? I'm doing all the right things. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Why? So also coming back to kind of what I was saying earlier, as far as like the soul work and stuff that I do, that is a really big piece in that part, because truly when we don't pay attention to the soul energetic kind of who we are being aspect of healing, it's a really big blind spot for a lot of people. And a lot of times that's where the key is, right? When we are running around living these stressed out lives where we're like anxious and stressed and on edge all the time, it literally is making our guts react completely differently. It's making us produce less digestive juices. It's like absolutely changing the bacterial makeup in your gut. It changes everything, because your body produces different things when you're stressed versus when you're not stressed. And stress looks different on everyone. So some things can stress out one person and not for another. And stress is not just mental, emotional stress. There's also environmental stressors, right? There's pollution in the air. It just depends. Or maybe like, you know, if you're using regular laundry detergents or chemical makeups, things like that. These are all stressors. So with all that being said, now that I've kind of sort of laid the groundwork, hopefully, and if you have any questions that are coming up throughout, we will have a Q&A part at the end. So, okay. I want to show you guys, let me do a little screen share. I want to show you guys what Candida looks like. Share screen. This guy. Look at it. This is Candida, you guys. So this is what Candida looks like. So Candida is a yeast. It's a very opportunistic yeast. And the thing about Candida is that no matter what, there will always be Candida in your gut. So the existence of Candida is not necessarily a problem, right? The problems come about when we have a Candida yeast overgrowth. And typically, you'll start noticing symptoms come up, and that's a pretty good indicator that the overgrowth has begun. So again, there's always going to be Candida in your gut. There's never going to be a time that there will be 0 Candida, and you don't want that. It is, you know, a yeast that exists in the gut for a reason. It's there on purpose. But when it starts to overgrow, there are so many things that can go wrong. Now, one thing I want to say really quickly is Candida is very, very, very rarely, if ever, the only thing that is happening in your gut. Again, like I said, Candida is very opportunistic. So what that means is that Candida sees an opportunity and jumps in pretty much. So a lot of times when we see really bad Candida overgrowth, we often see it in people who have taken a lot of antibiotics, because antibiotics, they're going to flush out any good bacteria that might typically combat Candida and create an environment where Candida can flourish, right? It's like, oh my God, yes, this blank canvas, I can flourish here. And so also, you know, it's not a bacteria. Again, it is a yeast or a fungus, a fungi, as some say. So it's not going to get wiped out with a antibiotic, right? So it has a really great opportunity to flourish in that situation. Another thing is the pill, because the pill does very similar, right? It also damages the gut, gets rid of good gut bacteria, flora, all of that. So it's another great opportunity for Candida to flourish. Now, the one thing that we don't often, or isn't often talked about, is the fact that actually any kind of parasite or bacterial viral infection that happens in your gut is a great opportunity for Candida to flourish. So more often than not, Candida actually comes after a bacterial infection, or not necessarily after, but in conjunction with bacterial infection or a parasite. And the reason for that is because the bacterial infection, viral infection, or the parasite is going to cause damage to your gut, right? So in your gut, we have all these little cells, we have epithelial cells, and then we have these kind of like hair-like cells that make up what we call a brush border. So typically when it comes to things like parasites and any kind of viral bacterial infection, things like this that are messing with the overall flora of your gut, they damage your brush border. And your brush border is not only a defense mechanism, but more so that's where you are absorbing nutrients. So when your food comes in, this is where you're really getting the nutrients in, things like that. You're building up your immunity. And then on top of that, after those little hair-like cells, we have our gut lining, right? Which is it's a cell lining. And actually, I think I have a picture of this on my laptop that I can share with you guys. I'll stop the screen share for right now, and I'm going to try to find this. But essentially, as the damage continues, these cells start to break down, and then there becomes gaps in the cells. So this is how leaky gut happens, right? And I think when people hear leaky gut, they don't think that it's like literal leaks in your gut, but it actually is. So the cell lining that makes up your gut, there become leaks in it because the cells get damaged. So when that happens, you have all kinds of things that can get into your bloodstream now, right? And this is how there's the whole cascading effect of your immune system gets activated because it now starts to recognize these food particles as, you know, dangerous or viral bacteria. Your body's trying to survive. It's trying to protect you. So it starts fighting off the food, but the food doesn't need to be fought. So then it starts attacking your own body. So the thing is that when it comes to these overgrowths like bacteria, parasites, Candida, as this leaky gut happens, that can actually go out into your blood system as well. So outside of your gut, Candida can actually get into your bloodstream. You can find Candida actually in all kinds of different organs, depending on how bad the overgrowth gets. And so this is why we see things like yeast infections when you have Candida overgrowth. There's oral thrush, right? So that's when you have the white coating on your tongue. And oral thrush can get bad. But it's interesting because if you go on Google and you look up Candida, you just Google Candida, what's going to come up is yeast infections, sometimes even like athlete's foot, fungal, like athlete's foot type of things. You'll see oral thrush. Other random fungal infections tend to come up. And the thing that's interesting, actually, even like dandruff, things like that, can be related to Candida or different fungal overgrowths. But it doesn't even talk about your gut. It doesn't talk about the fact that this all starts in your gut, and it's only when things get bad that it actually even spreads that far. So typically, Candida overgrowth starts with things like sugar cravings, right? And the reason that Candida will start as sugar cravings is because that's what it eats. That's what Candida eats. Candida feasts on sugar and yeast. And also, one big thing, and this is where I see so many people going wrong when it comes to trying to heal their gut, is they don't know exactly what is in there. So they don't know specifically if it's H. pylori, if it's SIBO, if it's Candida, if it is a different bacterial infection, if they have parasites, if it's a parasite, what type of parasite, what exactly are we looking at? They don't necessarily know exactly what's going on. And so they just kind of throw blanket supplements and diets at the problem, hoping that it'll make it all better. And then they don't see results, and then they get frustrated, and they just kind of quit and like, well, I guess I'll just deal with the symptoms until it gets bad enough again that the whole cycle starts over all over again. So knowing that it's Candida, it's important to make sure we avoid anything with prebiotics. So that would be any kind of fermented food, right? So typically we're like, oh, yay, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, all of these things that are fermented, we think that they're really great for our gut. And they are really great for your gut. If you don't have a different overgrowth that's already going on, because Candida does feast on carbs, starches, sugars, but it also loves prebiotics. And that's because it ends up kind of using prebiotics in the same way as carbs and digesting it, breaking it down the same way. So also I can't find this picture, so we're just gonna keep on going. But if you guys want to, you can always look it up. Actually, there's a ton of Google images. If you look up leaky gut, there's a lot of like little pictures of these cells, the epithelial cells that get damaged, and it shows you the physical leaks in the cells of your gut lining. And again, the reason that that's a problem is that your food, even if you're eating really great food, even if you're eating foods that you're not sensitive to and have nothing, no negative reaction in your body, they're getting into your bloodstream. And then that is going to affect your other organs, because your other organs then have to try to process out something that's not supposed to be there, right? So your liver gets taxed and overworked, your kidneys, like all of your organs. And the liver typically takes the brunt of it because the liver is your blood cleanser, which is why we see a lot of liver problems related to all of these things. Okay, let me pull this up. So I'm going to share with you guys really quick so if you were to come into my practice and we determined that you have Candida yeast overgrowth, then this is the basic diet sheet that I would send you. So as it says it literally right here, what is Candida? It's a normal organism that is present in the digestive tract. It's a type of yeast that is part of the commensal flora and is typically kept in check by the immune system and the rest of the microflora. However, Candida is opportunistic, and given the chance, it will overgrow and cause numerous symptoms. So the first thing I actually want to look at on here with you guys is Candida overgrowth symptoms. So I did a reel recently, which is part of why I noticed that there was so much. The reason I want to do the masterclass was because I put that reel out there and I had so many questions. There was so much interest in this, and so many people could relate to the symptoms that I talked about. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to give more education on this for people, so you can truly understand what's going on and you can feel empowered in what you can do about it. So let's talk right here a little bit about the symptoms. So it's really interesting because a lot of times Candida can give you similar symptoms to a hangover. And that is because of what Candida puts off when it's in an overgrown state, right? So again, if it's under control, you're not going to notice it. It's not going to be putting off all of these things in your system and creating these symptoms. But one of the most and biggest things in Candida is fatigue and brain fog. So for me, that is something that I will notice. If I've been like eating sugar too much or drinking too much, I start to notice the symptoms of Candida coming back. And the thing is that when you notice just a little bit, you can easily get it back under control. It's once things have kind of like gone way haywire and you're having like rashes on your legs and you're getting yeast infections all the time and you're constantly bloated and you're like a sugar fiend. That's when it gets a little bit tougher to kill off Candida, and it can be very challenging. It can be. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. So one of the first things for me that I start to notice is I start to get the brain fog. I start to get that like 2 o'clock, literally I could fall asleep. I'm so exhausted type of thing going on. And personally, I don't typically notice nausea. So right here, you see it says fatigue. I would even go as far as to say like chronic and like extreme fatigue. It's where you are like bone tired, like you are exhausted. You can't even bring yourself to get up off of the couch and like make yourself a meal. And this is where things get really challenging, because when you're in the state of being so exhausted, the only thing that could get you out of it, you feel like, is some caffeine or some sugar, and you don't have the energy to make yourself food. This is when it's really challenging to heal from things like Candida, because we have these crutches that we really rely on in order to feel better, right? And we really, really do rely on these things. And it's not like you're not being weak. You're not like being a pansy. Like, it's genuinely, this is what's challenging, right? When you're so exhausted, still being able to make yourself the food and to take the action and to not grab that, piece of chocolate. And for me, a lot of times it comes down to just not having it in my house, not having it available. If it's in my house, then probably at night I'm going to get a crazy sugar craving. I'll do great all day. I'm amazing all day. Then like 9 o'clock rolls around, the kids are in bed. I want to relax. I want to have a glass of wine and some chocolate. And if it's there, even if I am dealing with Candida symptoms, I will consume it. Can you guys relate to that? If it's there, I will eat it. I will do it. I will do the thing, even though I know that it's bad for me. So for me, at least, it has to not be there. So that's not true for everything, but I have my own standards and guidelines in my life. So if it's, gluten-free cookies, or again, like I'll get healthy chocolate, but it still has sweetener in it, obviously, because without sweetener, it'd just be gross. And, the wine too, I make sure that it's organic. I make sure that it's not California grapes. So I'm avoiding the fluoride. So all of these things, you can hear my baby crying. My husband hasn't, don't you worry. But yeah, if it's there, I will consume it, especially if it's something that is within like, I'm not going to eat like a donut or a ho-ho. I'm not going to eat something that has gluten in it or like a regular cookie, because to me, in my standards, that I don't even see that as like appetizing or food. Like, that's just not even an option. Whereas a gluten-free cookie that is dairy-free and egg-free and doesn't have anything that I'm sensitive to, that's a pretty enticing option. But it's got the sugar and it's got the, the oats and the carbs and all the things that are going to feed Candida. And alcohol is another big thing that feeds Candida, right? I said about anything that is fermented, anything that has yeast. Okay, so back to the symptoms: fatigue, nausea, gas, bloating, abdominal pain. The bloating, I would say, is probably one of the biggest things I hear with this. Nausea, I almost never hear. Fatigue, yes. Diarrhea, constipation. More often than not, I hear constipation. Thrush. So thrush can be a really big bad thing, but more often than not, you're just going to see that white coating on your tongue. And that's where those copper tongue scrapers come in. And those are really, really great, because that can help set you up in the morning for less sugar cravings, and just not having that feeling in your mouth. It helps. But a lot of times, and you may have noticed this for yourself, maybe you're eating really well, but then you have some sugar or something, and then boom, white coating. There it is. Yeah, it happens. Ear and throat infections. So this can happen a lot if you're getting sick pretty often, or like you have post-nasal drip, or maybe you're just always a little bit congested, or you always have like that little bit of kind of like mucusy thing happening. Fungal infections of the nail/skin, athlete's foot. So this is athlete's foot specifically, but that can be like the armpit rash that I talked about in the reel that I made, which is something that people almost never correlate with Candida. They always think it's something about their deodorant or their laundry detergent, or, you know, something like that. But I actually see very often, and 100% for myself, and I notice it on my scalp too. My scalp will get flaky and itchy if I'm eating a lot of sugar and drinking a lot of wine or something, because my Candida will start to flourish again. You know, it doesn't take all that much. And it's just about being cognizant and keeping it in check. Once you have like gotten the main Candida gone, done, out, it's really just about being cognizant. And it doesn't mean that you can never have sugar or wine again. It's just like, okay, I'm overdoing it right now. I need to chill out a little bit. And then, yeah, that's how we live. Yeah, so nasal congestion, post-nasal drip, white coating on the tongue, vaginal itching or burning, so yeast infections. And I would say along with that too, you know, like the foul odor or seeing like the thicker discharge, stuff like that. Mood disorders, depression, anxiety, irritability. That's a big one. I've never worked with anyone who has had gut issues that hasn't been affected by it emotionally, whether that be anxiety, depression, whatever it is. There's always a deeper way that it is affecting your life. Brain fog or inability to concentrate. The brain fog when Candida is bad is bad. I literally sometimes would feel like my eyes, it would be like they were glazed over, and like I was seeing the world almost like it was physically foggy. Like everything is just kind of out of focus and blurry, and kind of just like there's no clarity, there's no sharpness, there's no motivation, no drive, no like, hey, I feel really good, I have energy right now, I want to do things, let me, right, like that goes away. You just kind of feel like in that zombie kind of state. Headaches and migraines is another big one. Skin conditions, and this is why I see a lot of things like Candida, and I deal a lot with the gut, because acne, right, is so deeply related to any kind of gut issues. And I have worked a lot with women with acne because I dealt with really bad acne, PCOS, all of that. But yeah, itching, rashes, eczema, psoriasis. I mentioned psoriasis earlier. The armpit rash, again, that's a big one. Food chemical sensitivities, food cravings, sugar, carbohydrates. That's, again, one of the biggest ones. That's a really big one, because you're not just kind of like, I could go for something sweet. Like you become like a fiend. Like you want all of the sugar. It's like I was talking about that 9 o'clock phenomenon, right? Where you're like, you've been good all day, and then you're like, I have to have something sweet right now. Like I don't even know what I want, but I have to have something. And you're opening your fridge, you're opening your pantry, you're like, I know there is something in here somewhere that I didn't get rid of, and last time I was at the grocery store, I have to have picked up some kind of chocolate or ice cream or something that was sweet, and I have to have it right now, or I'm gonna go crazy. I need it. You become like an addict. And that is the Candida talking. It's not you. It's not that you don't have willpower or that you're a bad person or anything like that. It is the Candida in your gut, literally sending out signals that it needs food, because the Candida is starving. And that is the entire point of a Candida diet, is to starve the Candida. So it's going to fight back. It wants to live. It wants to survive. It wants to keep going. Again, it's very opportunistic, and it's going to take advantage of any chance that it has to try to get more carbs, more sugar, more food for itself, right? And that can also come up in alcohol cravings. So, you know, if you're struggling to not drink, it might not be driven from a mental, emotional place. I mean, sure, that can contribute, but it could actually really deeply be the Candida, because alcohol alone couldn't keep Candida alive and flourishing. Other things, weight gain and loss, asthma, hay fever. So yeah, if you're experiencing allergies, that can be related to having Candida, having all this stuff going on in your gut. But again, a big thing that I see really is the mood, the brain fog, The skin stuff, so acne and candida are essentially just like bedfellows, especially if you're noticing it a lot on your cheeks. Your cheek area is very heavily related to the gut. But even outside of that, just because maybe if it isn't completely on your cheeks, that doesn't mean that it's not, you don't have candida. Does that make sense? Because again, once the candida gets out into your bloodstream, then it can start to affect your liver, which is, you know, the temple area. Or it can start to affect your hormones, your endocrine system, which is here. Or it can start to affect your lymphatic system, which is, you know, your neck, this whole area. Any like body acne, that's all related to your lymphatic system and needing lymphatic drainage and detoxification. So again, like I said, if you were to come into my practice and we determine that, okay, you probably have candida, this is the sheet that I would send you. So if you want to take screenshots, you can. But this is very, very big, important information. It talks about what is candida, what causes candida and yeast overgrowth. So yeah, again, candida normally is secondary. That is the one thing I really want to drive home today, is that if you're dealing with candida symptoms, and you can pretty easily be like, okay, like 99% sure I have candida. The real question is, okay, what's going on underneath that? Because candida doesn't just happen all by itself. Yes, there is the sugar aspect to it, but it's almost never the only thing. And while candida and leaky gut can make your food sensitivities worse and more intense, if you're eating things that you're sensitive to in the first place, that can also make the candida and the leaky gut worse. So they work together, right? One makes one worse, the other makes the other worse too. So it's like when you're doing it all, it just all is going haywire and your whole body ends up just going crazy. So the thing that's interesting is even things like a lot of EMF exposure can even contribute to candida. So like it says right here, it includes cell phones, Wi-Fi, smart meters, which is tough because we can't escape those things. So why does candida cause brain fog? This is what I was saying earlier. And you can just read this if you'd like to. But again, candida it produces a chemical that is very similar to the chemical that is produced in your body when you have a hangover, which is why a lot of times the symptoms feel the same as a hangover and having candida yeast overgrowth. You know, you're just tired, you're out of it. You don't feel like yourself. Oh, right here. High levels of a toxin called acetaldehyde. Yep. Okay. So how can a candida diet help with overgrowth? The biggest thing, you guys, is that you're depriving the candida of what it wants to eat. You're not giving it the sugar that it wants, the carbs that it wants, the starches that it wants, the yeast and fungi that it wants. And I mean, that's mostly it. You have to kind of starve it in order to have any chance of getting your gut back to being in good standing. However, just killing candida is not going to fix the problems. I hope that makes sense, because candida is sort of, even though candida in a way is an underlying root cause of a bunch of symptoms, the bigger question is, how did our body get into a state where candida was able to flourish? Right? How was candida able to flourish? And that's where we have to look deeper. What are the things that are driving this? Is it our stress? Is it our lifestyle? Is it the way that we eat? You know, there's usually a whole bunch of things that play into this. Yeah. And again, it's rare that candida is the only pathogenic thing that's happening in your gut. Typically there's, you know, a parasite infestation or bacterial overgrowth, something like that, that created the opportunity for candida to invade, essentially. So right here, Anti-Candida Diet, let's talk about it. So should be followed for a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks. And then there's antifungal supplements that you can take. I'm going to talk about supplements in a little bit. We'll get to that. And I'm going to give you guys a link so that you can shop from my Wellevate. So Wellevate, if you don't know what it is a way that practitioners can give you access to supplements. So you can, there's a lot of supplements out there that are not available to the general public, but you have to get them through a practitioner. So Wellevate is my practitioner store 4 supplements that I use for my clients, and that's where I build out their supplement protocols. And, you know, if you were a client of mine, I would make a supplement protocol that's tailored to you, and I would send it to you, and you would just purchase directly from there. And the cool thing about buying through Welevate is that you're also going to get a 10% discount by buying through my store. I give you guys a discount, so, which I don't have to do, by the way, but I do, because I want you guys to feel some savings there. I know all this stuff can be stressful. So I'll talk about the supplements in a bit. And it right here, although fermented foods contain probiotics, they also feed Candida. So it's best to bring Candida under control before you add in any kind of fermented food. So the sauerkraut and stuff, you know, I see so many people, and it's really frustrating for me because, again, I try not to be that person that like inserts myself where I'm not necessarily wanted. You know, people aren't asking me, but they're like, oh, I'm doing all these great things for my gut. I'm eating, you know, all these probiotic foods, and I'm fermenting, and they'll be doing like home ferments and making their own kombucha. And I was that person. I literally was that person, because I used to make my own kombucha. I used to like do all of these things, and like, it's really great and wonderful. But if you have something like Candida, and actually also if you have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, prebiotics are feeding the bad bacteria and the bad yeast and fungi that you're trying to get rid of. So it like breaks my heart to see it, because I'm like, I don't want you, but there's also only so much that I can do. Yes, so those things are wonderful, but time and place. Foundational foods for the Anti-Candida diet are high quality animal protein, meat, poultry, seafood, and eggs, non-starchy vegetables, healthy fats. So coconut oil, I know it says right here, especially coconut oil, but coconut oil is high in caprylic acid, which is really, really great for getting Candida under control. So I would almost even like take spoonfuls of coconut oil on the daily, especially because when you are eating a low carb diet, which this ends up being a low carb diet, because you can't really eat starchy carbs because that's feeding the Candida, and you can't really eat much sugar because that's feeding Candida. So you end up really kind of eliminating a lot of, you know, carbs really altogether. Like rice, you would not want to eat. Oats, you wouldn't really want to eat. Definitely even like sweet potato, even regular potatoes, they're all very starchy. Even green plantains, or cassava, which are things that, you know, typically if you're someone who's like eliminated a lot of foods, those are kind of things that you tend to rely on as, you know, healthy carb staples. But this ends up being quite low carb because, and granted, I do want to say here one caveat is, if your Candida overgrowth is not that bad, so maybe you're just noticing a few symptoms, definitely some is there, maybe the overgrowth isn't that bad, you can be a little bit more lenient. Like I would say that the majority of the week, you should probably at least still not be eating sugar. Definitely no like processed sugars, cane sugar, anything like that. Maybe not adding any kind of sweeteners to anything, except for stevia. Stevia is safe, you guys. Magical. You can have stevia on a Candida diet. So you can have a sweetener, but it has to be stevia. But if it's not that bad, then I would still personally have the carbs, but not do the sugar. Because the processed sugar, the alcohol, those are the things that are really going to get Candida out of control. If you are needing the carbs, like for me, you know, I'm breastfeeding right now, obviously, so I need carbs. And a lot of people, depending on your metabolic type, really need carbs in order to kind of like be able to live their life. So the biggest thing is the sugar. Like the sugar is really doing it. And don't get me wrong, the carbs ultimately are processed in your body like sugar, but we do need some carbs. So just try to go for lower sugar fruits, right? So berries, I think it says right here, green apple, berries. And I would say, you know, if you're having an apple, if you're having a green apple, have it with some nut butter, you know, whatever kind you can have, whether that be almond butter, peanut butter. And I know over here it says legumes, beans, this includes peanuts. Like this is pretty extreme and strict. Personally, I like to go more so based on your personal food sensitivities in my practice. So if you came to me with Candida, yes, I would send you this sheet, but with, you know, little asterisks essentially of, okay, this is what it says, but I don't think Candida is not the main thing that we are dealing with right now. So definitely let's cut the sugar, let's cut the alcohol, and the prebiotics. So let's not, do the sauerkraut and all that stuff because, why? Let's just cut all of that. But let's make sure that we're still having some fruit every day. Maybe let's have some white potatoes. Let's throw some sweet potato in here and there in small amounts. I would say even you could do some rice here and there, especially if it's brown rice. And typically I'm a white rice person, I will say. I'm not huge into brown rice because it's actually harder to digest with that fibrous shell exterior, which is what makes it brown instead of white rice. But I like to take this a little bit more of a moderate approach, especially because I think if you go too extreme too quickly, you can set yourself up for failure. So I think it's better to go a little bit more moderate with it, supplement as you need to, and maybe just be willing to take a little bit longer with it and know that okay, maybe this once a week, I'm going to have a glass of wine or something. Okay, yes, you're going to be feeding your Candida. You're not helping yourself. But if mentally, emotionally, your stress level will be helped by letting yourself have the thing occasionally, then I personally think it is worth it. Because there's no point in doing a crazy strict, restrictive diet that is just going to make you miserable. There's just no point in it. It's not going to fulfill you. It's not going to get you to your ultimate goal of feeling better. So it might not happen as quickly. Yes, sure. If you follow this to a T for 30, it's probably going to be more than 30 days. I'm not going to lie. 30 days to completely eliminate Candida is being very generous. So this says 6 to 8 weeks. I would say 6 to 8 weeks, minimum. Hold on one second. I just knocked this over. Okay. Whoops. Yeah. So it depends for everyone. It depends on what the overgrowth is like. It depends on what else is going on. It depends, did you get a GI map test done? Do you know exactly the strains of things that are happening in your gut? Are you killing off the right things? But especially, when it comes to things like root vegetables, it says they should be avoided or eaten in very limited quantities. I go for the eat them in limited quantities. Don't avoid the root vegetables altogether. Still eat some carrots, still have some potatoes here and there, still have some beets or some squash. You need some carbs, okay? Now, with all of that being said, right here, it also specifies more sweeteners that don't feed Candida. So you can have some things that are sweet here and there. It's really important when you are reducing carbs that you up your fat intake. So we have to make sure that we are still nourishing ourselves. So making sure that we're getting full and staying full. And the best way to do that when you're eating lower in carbs is to make sure you're having a lot of fats. Definitely protein too, but that kind of happens naturally. But the fats really, really will keep you satiated. So when you're cooking your non-starchy vegetables, when you're making your zucchini or your cauliflower or whatever, make sure that you're putting a lot of good, healthy fats with it, right? Cook it in bacon grease from uncured bacon, put it in some healthy tallow, use olive oil if you're not cooking. If you're putting it over a salad or something, use a lot of olive oil. There's also foods that help to kill Candida, and those foods are things like garlic, oregano. Garlic is a really big one, by the way. Ginger is really great. What else? Yeah, those are a lot of, the garlic is a big one, and I'll kind of get to that in a little bit as we go into the supplements. But I want to just really quick tell you guys about this one little thing that you can do at home. And it's kind of like a little DIY Candida test that you can do for yourself. So I'm going to share this with you. Now, I will tell you this slide that I'm about to share with you, the screenshot is copyrighted. It's directly from my practitioner course. So I will share it with you guys, but please do make sure that that's not, really, you'd just be risking it for yourself because it's copyrighted material. But I'm going to share my screen here and show it to you guys. And it's just easier to show this to you. So it's a little spit test that you can do. So you get a cup, you're going to fill the cup halfway with room temperature water first thing in the morning. So it has to be before you eat or drink anything or brush your teeth. Try to work up like at least a dime-sized amount of saliva in your mouth and then spit it out into this glass of lukewarm water. And then you're going to watch the spit for the next 45 minutes. You don't have to like physically watch it for 45 minutes straight, but just have it there. Check on it a couple times throughout the 45 minutes and see if the saliva stays floating to the top, if it goes to the ground, or if it sort of, as you can see here in this picture, sort of like has string like legs that start coming down. And this is not like, you guys, I want to specify, if you do this test and it says that you don't have Candida, but you have all the symptoms of Candida and all this other stuff, like there's probably still Candida overgrowth going on. This test is not 100% foolproof. It's just something that you can do at home kind of if you want to. It doesn't hurt to do it. So again, the interpretation here, if the saliva floats on the top, then you probably don't have Candida. If it grows legs, then there's probably some dysbiosis going on in your gut, some Candida overgrowth, things are a little bit questionable. And if it straight up goes to the bottom, then you probably have Candida. So this is just a little test that you can do for yourself at home. I think it's just a great little thing. I tend to have my clients, when they think, or pretty much after doing like an initial assessment, if I have any kind of inkling that there's likely a Candida overgrowth happening, this is what I recommend, especially for people who don't want to spend the money on doing a GI map, which is pretty much for your whole gut. It tells us what's going on in there. For people who don't want to spend the money on that, this is, just something quick, easy, free that you can do at home. Again, it's not 100%, but it gives you some information. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, let's move on to more of what to do about Candida. So we kind of talked about the symptoms. We talked about the diet. And hopefully, I feel like the diet a lot of times stresses people out and it makes people kind of like, oh, well, never mind. I can't do that. I can't not have sugar. I can't not drink my glass of wine every night, or like, I can't do that. But here's the thing. First of all, I promise you can. And second of all, remember that it's the Candida in your gut that wants to be fed more that is making you feel that way. So for sugar cravings especially, you have to give it a solid 3 to 5 days of really pretty strictly not having, any sugar or alcohol. And usually the sugar cravings dissipate significantly. Now, it's not going to be 100%. You're still going to want carbs especially. And I think it's good to make sure that you're having some healthy versions. But yeah, it's, if we have Candida overgrowth, we just can only get away with so much when it comes to sugar and carbs. All right, so really quick, I'm going to send you guys in the chat. Where's the chat? Where did it go? If I can, I'm going to send you in the chat. There it is. Nope, that's not it. Okay, hold on. Okay, so I'm going to send you the link to my Wellevate store. And for those of you who are watching the replay, I don't think you can see the chat. So I will also put it up on the screen. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. I thought I had it saved in my cache, but apparently I copied and pasted something else since then. Account settings. Sensory. Here we go. Okay, so it's wellevate.me/harmony-pattern. And I will put this up on the screen. Okay, I'll share my screen here with you guys in a second. But it's in the chat. If you're on live, you can see it in there. And just so you know, you will have to set up an account on Wellevate in order to shop through Wellevate, because again, these are not supplements that are available to the general public. You do have to be connected to a practitioner in order to be able to shop their Wellevate. So this is my personal, or my, I guess I say personal, but it's my professional Wellevate. So yeah, with that link, you guys have access to shop and you can purchase supplements. And I'm going to go over, the reason I'm talking about this is because I'm going to go over the Candida supplement protocol that I have. And I'm going to share that here with you on the screen. I'm just pulling it up. And we're going to kind of talk about the different supplements, the reason that I have the supplements on here, etc., etc. Okay, so let me share my screen again. Let's do this thing. Poor baby. Okay. All right, here we go. So, ooh, that's on back order. That's too bad. There's another one I can recommend, if not that one. Okay, so here we are, supplements. Now, if you're like, okay, I only have so much money that I can spend on supplements. And by the way, right over here, this should be reflecting to you that 10% off price. So I believe that's the price difference with the 10% off. And that's, again, what I offer my clients through my dispensary. So first and foremost, Saccharomyces boulardii. This is an amazing, it's actually a yeast, but it is a beneficial yeast. And the cool thing that Saccharomyces does is when you're taking it, it crowds out, so it kind of fills in the space with beneficial bacteria to crowd out the yeast overgrowth or the bacterial overgrowth. So if you're taking an antibiotic, make sure you're taking Saccharomyces. Same thing if you're on the pill. If you suspect Candida, Saccharomyces, definitely 100% recommend it. Again, it's a beneficial yeast that crowds out Candida, which is great. Now, you do have to be very careful with the strains of probiotics that you take if you have anything like SIBO or Candida, because, again, prebiotic strains will feed it. So I like to go with the lacto variety, Lactobacillus. So this is the Flora Pro LP probiotic. Sorry, I don't know if that's distracting for you guys, but it's very distracting for me, the baby crying. But again, my husband does have him. I think he's trying to get him some milk. Anyway, so the probiotic, again, you need to be replenishing the good bacteria while not making sure that you're not feeding the Candida, right? Because you don't want to be taking a probiotic thinking you're doing this great thing for yourself while you're actually feeding the Candida. That just sucks. Now, I do want to say, I really don't recommend doing a harsh Candida protocol unless you're working with a practitioner, unless you know for sure that you have pathogens in your gut. So you've done, a GI map, you've done the stool test to make sure that it is there and all of that. So I'll talk about one more thing, or a couple more things that you can take that maybe aren't quite as intense, but are important. So one big thing to take is a GI detox. So it says right here, take 1 capsule 3 times a day for 8 weeks, take without food. So GI detox is really great because what it does is it's going to help you not have Herx symptoms. So Herx is the die-off reaction. So when things like Candida die off, it can make you feel worse. You can literally feel like you have the flu. It can make your Candida symptoms heightened. So like that brain fog, the fatigue, like all of these things can actually get so much worse at first when you're killing it off. And that's absolutely on purpose, right? Like the Candida does not want to die, you guys. It doesn't want to be eliminated from your body. So it is like fighting back. It's die-off reaction, and that's not just for Candida. This is true for parasites, other bacterial overgrowth. So it can be really intense and really hard, and it makes so many people quit. So I prefer that you go a little bit lighter with things, right? So you don't necessarily take a supplement to kill Candida while doing a Candida diet. because the die-off can just be really rapid and really intense, and it can make you quit. I'd rather you're in it for the long haul and you see success. So taking something like GI detox is really great because it's going to absorb. So there's things like charcoal and I keep wanting to say yeast because we've just been saying yeast all the time, but charcoal and what's the word? Like a mud mass, clay in it, and it absorbs the toxins and helps to eliminate them from your body. So it kind of like mops them up. That's what people tend to call it. It mops up. So GI detox is very important to take whether you are doing a harsher protocol to kill off Candida or another bacterial infection or not. Now, if you saw the reel that I did, I talked about taking Interphase Plus, and I have mine right here. So Interphase Plus by Claire Labs. I do have this available. I mean, you can buy this through my Wellevate. And I also have my Saccharomyces right here. So the Interphase Plus, the only reason that I didn't put this on the protocol is because on this particular protocol, I have Biocidin. So both of these have similar functions. The Biocidin does way more than the Interphase, but the Biocidin also does do what the Interphase does. So what both of these do is they break down biofilm. So biofilm sucks, okay? Biofilm, if you think about, you know, when like plaque builds up on your teeth and you have to go and get it professionally cleaned. I mean, obviously you should be getting your teeth cleaned, I think every 6 months. But that plaque that builds up, the really hard plaque, you know, that you cannot get off with a toothbrush, that is actually a form of biofilm. So this happens in your gut. And this will happen with Candida. So there can be Candida biofilms that make it so that you're doing all the right things, right? You're not feeding Candida, you're starving it, you're, you know, maybe you're even taking like an anti-Candida type of thing, you're working really hard to kill it off, but it keeps coming back. And that is because of these biofilms. So the biofilms a lot of times are sabotaging your results. Now, the only thing is when you are killing off or when you're, so these break up biofilms, this Biocidin right here and the Interphase Plus, that is what this does. It breaks up biofilm. Biofilm goes way far beyond Candida, but we're not going to get into all of that. So it's really important that you're breaking down the biofilms because otherwise it's just going to keep coming back. And you're going to get really annoyed and really frustrated because you're working really hard and doing all the things. And why does it keep coming back? It's because of biofilms. So the only thing with Interphase Plus is that it does have egg white. I think there's an enzyme that comes from an egg white derivative in here. So especially if you're allergic to eggs or if you're a vegan, if you have a sensitivity, it's a little like, you know, it's only an enzyme, so you'll probably be okay. If your sensitivity is really bad, or again, really especially if you're allergic, this does have the egg whites in it. So, or not egg whites, but it has an enzyme that's derived from egg whites in it. So that's one reason that you might not want to take the Interphase. But Biocidin is a great option. Now, with Biocidin, it is an expensive supplement. This thing is very intense. This is what I use for most of my bacterial protocols, most of my parasite protocols. It's a very harsh supplement. So you have to go really slow with it. You see, I say 1 to 10 drops 3 times a day. So literally, if you were just starting out, I would want you to start out with 1 drop 3 times a day. You could even start with 1 drop 1 time a day. If you haven't done much in the ways of healing, if you've done a lot, you might be able to work your way up faster. That's something that I teach my clients as well, is self-titrating and all of that. I'm not going to get into all that right now. But Biocidin is really, really great for breaking down biofilm and also killing off a lot of bacterial infections, things like that. Next is Candidex, which apparently is on a vendor back order, which that kind of sucks. There is another Candida one that you can take called Candifence. You can actually, it's a Dr. Amy Myers supplement called Candifence. So you can look that up on here and you should be able to find that, and you could get that instead if the Candidex is not available whenever you are watching this. And then support mucosa is important because you really don't want to be like just breaking down a bunch of stuff in your gut without also providing it the tools to rebuild. right? It needs to be able to rebuild. So these are the supplements. I'm not going to do anything further on supplements because I really, when it comes to supplements, again, like this is not me giving you a personal recommendation to take these. I'm just providing you guys information. Really for a protocol that is tailored to you, you need to work with a practitioner one-on-one. It doesn't need to be me, but yeah, I really recommend working with a practitioner on that part. Okay, where are we? So let me pull up my notes really quick because I'm kind of losing my place now that we've talked about the supplements. I do also want to say really quick that you absolutely can eliminate Candida without taking a Candida killing supplement. So you don't necessarily need to take the Candidex or Candifence, anything like that. You can kind of just starve it and do other more kind of subtle things. It's just going to take a lot longer. So it depends what you want to do. Do you want to go really hard with it, maybe have a really, really tough time? Or do you want to go a little bit more moderate to mild and it'll take longer, but you won't have as bad of a time, essentially. So the last thing I really want to talk about here about all of this is your detoxification pathways. And the reason that this is important is because as you are killing off anything really, but especially killing off something like Candida, yes, it's going to have the die-off symptoms. Yes, you can take something like the GI detox, or you could even just take plain charcoal pills. Make sure that you're taking it away from any supplements, away from your food, because it will also absorb nutrients. So you definitely need to make sure you're taking it away from other things, but doing that will help remove the toxins and all of the die-off and everything. However, you still need to help your body in moving everything out. So it is so important, so imperative that if you're doing anything really with the gut to try and kill off anything, that you're also working on your detoxification pathways. So one of my favorite ways, and I talk about this all the time, there's two really simple things you can do, and that's oil pulling and dry brushing. So both of those help your lymphatic system. Oil pulling, you just swish oil in your mouth. You want to do 20 minutes as the goal, but you could literally even do 5 minutes and you're still going to see some benefit. This is going to help lymphatic drainage. You do have to do it on an empty stomach. A lot of times when you spit out the oil, which you need to do into a trash can, not into the sink, so you don't clog your sink. When you spit it out, a lot of times you might have mucus come out, which is good. You're eliminating toxins from your body. Dry brushing is really great, and I like to do the both together. You could also take a bath. So like, for instance, if you wanted to make it like all packaged in one, you could put the oil in your mouth while you're swishing it, dry brush, and then while the oil is still in your mouth, you could take a bath. And then in the bath, right, you want to sweat a little bit. Sweating is so good for you. So that's another thing you could do. Get into the sauna. Exercising is really great, but you do need to be very careful exercising your exercise intensity whenever you're killing off anything like Candida, because exercise is a stressor. Although it can be a positive stressor, if your intensity is too high, it's going to be detrimental and you're going to be working against yourself. So this is a time for, nice long walks, which if you work up a sweat on your walk, that's wonderful. Sweating is going to be really, really beneficial for moving everything out of your system. On top of that, we want to make sure that our livers are able to detox and flush really well, which is why I love Coffee Enemas. Again, if you saw the reel that I did, that was one of the things that I listed to help with Candida, because again, Candida is very rarely just in your gut. It is very rarely the only thing that is happening in your body, or definitely never the only thing that is in your gut. So it's likely in your bloodstream. It's likely gone to other organs. So it's been taxing your liver. So doing coffee enemas, the purpose of them is not really for your colon, it's for your liver. So doing so is going to help clear the detoxification pathways in your liver and allow Candida to move out of your body way more quickly. So I know people hear coffee enemas and they're like, oh my God, so weird. I really highly recommend, there's a Facebook group called Coffee Enema Support Group. I'm in the group. I ask questions in there randomly when I'm like, what about this? Because yes, I love coffee enemas and I have my clients do them often and I love doing them myself, but I still have questions sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm not like the expert on coffee enemas. They're just a tool that I think is extremely effective. But you'll see a lot of people in there talk about like doing their enemas and they can see the candida even coming out in the bowl, as gross as that is. But it is a great way to move candida out of your system, to keep it moving, because you could have candida sitting in your colon. It can be in, yeast infections, vagina. It can be in like your vaginal canal and all of those things. So it's important that we're moving it. We have to be drinking a lot of water, really kind of flushing our system. Coffee enemas are great for that. Again, for the liver, people are always so hesitant, but my recommendation is just to give it a try, get a kit, give it a go. Like, just try it for 7 days straight and see how you feel. Join that Coffee Enema support group on Facebook. There's so much good information in there, and people link in there also to the best products and things to use, because you have to use a specific coffee. There's like a catheter, this red catheter, that's a really good one to use so you don't damage like any of the tissue there as you're inserting the enema. They have a lot of tricks. Coffee enemas, typically you want to try to hold it for 15 minutes. It's not like a water enema where you just kind of, it's in and out and you're flushing it. You're trying to hold this for 15 minutes. So you can take an Epsom salt bath while you're holding it. Yeah, there's a decent amount to learn about it, but I really do think it's worth it, especially if you're doing any kind of like bacteria, fungal, parasite elimination protocol. It's so beneficial to just get things moving, move it. So, yeah, one last thing, going back to the exercise thing, again, working up a sweat is really great, but please do be very cognizant of your exercise intensity. Getting in a sauna would be really wonderful. Going for walks, doing gentle yoga, stretching, like getting movement is very important. It's just a matter of not going too hard with it. So, all right, guys, I'm going to really wrap this up here. Yeah. So I realized though really quick, let me just share the screen for those of you who are watching the replay. I'm going to come back over really quick to my Google here on my notes. But to right here. So this is what my store is going to look like when you come to it. Again, you're going to have to sign up for an account in order to purchase through this. And it's wellevate.me/harmony-pattern. So I just wanted you to see this visually so that you know what's there. That's what it is. Yeah, that's how you can access it. Okay, screen share stop. All right, guys, so I hope that you found this helpful. I want to open up right now to Q&A. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you have any questions that you want me to answer. We'll keep this in the recording as well. And then I have one more thing to share with you guys. Also, actually, let me talk about that really quick, just in case you have any questions on it. So I wanted to let you guys know about a program that I am opening up, which is called Gut Punch. So it's going to be all about the gut and healing the gut. So it's not going to be Candida specifically focused, but it's about healing your gut. So if you're dealing with Candida, then that would be a part of it. In this program, you would get at least one of 2 lab tests done. So the main test that we're going to be doing in this program is the GI map, which is a stool test that tells us the levels of healthy and unhealthy bacteria in your gut. It tells us if you have any type of bacterial infections. H. pylori is on there. What else? Parasites, yeast. So it's a very, very comprehensive test. It's a very big test. Yeah, so we would be doing that test, or I would say, or the food sensitivity test. Definitely you do need to do the GI map to be in the program, but the food sensitivity test is optional. I would recommend it because it's going to be very helpful in the healing process, but it doesn't have to be done. So the program itself, the cost is going to be either 4 payments of $111, that would be weekly payments, or a one-time fee of $444. So I'm offering that specifically for anyone who watches this webinar. Outside of that, the payment plan after the next 5 days. So again, this webinar, you'll be able to watch for 5 days until it becomes a paid program. So if you're watching this, you're able to get the payment plan at $111, whereas the payment plan will go up to $120 per payment for 4 payments. So you end up paying more essentially, or the one-time payment of $444. So that doesn't include your labs. The labs are separate, but that covers the program. So within there, we would have calls. And also another bonus I want to offer the people who are watching this webinar specifically is that you'll get a one-on-one call as well versus just the group calls. So mostly it's going to be group calls, but you'll get a one-on-one call with me. Obviously, we'll go over your test results and all that jazz. And it's going to be really great. I think it's a really great time to kind of like get your gut under control, start to understand things. It's 4 weeks long. It's going to be really awesome. I'm really excited about it. So now I'm going to open up for Q&A. If you have any questions about that or anything earlier from the webinar, I will go ahead. Anya, do you have any questions? Do you want me to unmute you? Okay, I'll unmute you. Unmute. There we go.
Hey, that was super helpful. Wow, like so much good information. I took
Good.
like pages of notes. I have a couple questions. So
Okay.
one of them is I have a lot of different health issues. I have Hashimoto's, other autoimmune stuff like leaky gut, SIBO, and seem to be dealing with a lot of mold issues. And it seems like a lot of the symptoms are so similar for all of those things. So do you have any tips for like how to tell what would be Candida versus like SIBO or mold?
Yeah, so this is a big part of this is where testing comes in, unfortunately, because here's the thing about testing. As much as I love it, it's like no one really wants to spend money on getting testing done, right? Like you don't want to have to like shell out the money for it if you can just figure it out for yourself. But at the same time, and I know you've worked with like other naturopaths and stuff, so I'm sure you've done a good amount of testing up until now, I can only imagine. But the amount of insight that testing gives you when it's correlated with, you know, like looking at your whole life and looking at your symptoms, when you can correlate that with information that's on a test, that's going to be the biggest thing. When it comes to mold is so tricky. Mold is really, really tricky to deal with. And you have to absolutely look at environmental factors when it comes to things like mold. And a lot of times, again, the thing I want to remind you of is that our bodies, like, it's one big organism, right? So there can be a lot of different things that have overlapping symptoms. So it could be that you're having these symptoms from the mold and the Hashimoto's and Candida. Do you know what I mean? So it's not necessarily just one thing. Like these things all work together and kind of compound on top of each other, and having one thing can trigger another. So for instance, with all of this, it could have been exposure to mold that triggered the Hashimoto's. It could have been Candida overgrowth that triggered the SIBO, or it could have been the SIBO that triggered the Candida. Do you know what I mean? So it's like a lot of times once there's one thing, there's another, and there's another, and there's another. There's almost never just one thing, which is why it's so important to look at your whole body as a whole and not get so married to like the diagnoses, if that makes sense. So like not be so much about like, I have to eliminate SIBO and I have to eliminate Candida and I have to eliminate Hashimoto's versus, okay, like there's clearly there's a lot of things happening in my body right now. And all of that is happening because of something, right? Like there's always something that made it possible for all of these things to kind of come about. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So whether that be, you know, a lifestyle stressor or, yeah, it could be a lifestyle stressor. It could have been something like mold exposure. A lot of times though, and this is why I like doing, you know, sort of like the deeper soul work and stuff like that, is that there is something deeper going on, whether that be, you know, just kind of unhappiness in a job, or um, like things that seem kind of unimportant that are really driving our symptoms. And then from there, it all just kind of like cascades down, because once one thing goes wrong, it all just kind of starts to fall apart. So rebuilding, which is why it's important to look at everything when we rebuild, right? We have to look at the food and the supplements and the lifestyle, but we also have to look at like the mental, emotional, energetics, soul work side of it, because it all works hand in hand. Like truly, I think my brother that I was telling you about with the autoimmune condition with psoriasis is a great example, because he does the right things, right? Like he eats well. Yeah, sure. He hasn't done like a food sensitivity test. He doesn't know exactly his food sensitivities, but overall, like, you know, he eats pretty close to like paleo AIP-ish. He definitely hasn't had like potatoes or tomatoes or anything like that in like years because of his autoimmune condition. You know, generally he doesn't live a bad lifestyle by any means. It's not like he smokes or anything. You know, he's moderately active. He looks like a healthy person, like he's thin, he's not overweight, and yet he struggles so much. And a big driver of all of that is his stress, because he lives a very stressed out life. Mm-hmm. So I hope this is answering your question. Yeah. I guess my point is that it's not so much about what exactly the thing is versus looking at you as a whole person and a whole life and a whole being and saying, okay, I've done these tests. I have this information. Now I have to look at what made it possible for all of these things to flourish in my body. Right? So I think it's kind of like taking a step back and just looking kind of even a step beneath the surface, even beneath, right, just the test results, because the test results are information that guide us, but they are not it. Like that's not everything. Did that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about garlic also, because I know that it's a prebiotic food. So how is that, like the other prebiotics you should avoid, but why is that one like helpful?
So garlic doesn't, it's technically the alicillin, I think it is. It's like a compound that's in garlic that's helpful about garlic, which is why typically I would have you actually take a garlic, the alicillin, which is like a garlic pill. I'm more inclined to have someone take that versus eat garlic as much. It's just, and there's also, garlics also have sulfite content, which a lot of people are actually sensitive to, and can be pretty problematic for people, sulfites. So yeah, I definitely I would recommend a garlic supplement over eating garlic, but also I wouldn't say that garlic is a high prebiotic by any means. You know, like things like fermented foods like sauerkraut, like that has a lot of prebiotics, which is good, just not in this case. Whereas garlic, it might have some prebiotics in it, but it's not like, I wouldn't eat garlic to be like, I'm getting my prebiotics. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not really significant.
Okay.
Just like how pretty much all foods have some carbs in them, right? Like you can't have 0 grams of carbs in your diet. Like every vegetable, like these things all have some carb content. But at the same time, we're going to avoid things like sweet potatoes that are like a lot of carbs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you too about the coffee enemas. So I'm very sensitive to coffee, my stomach and small intestine. So for someone like me, is that still beneficial and okay?
Yes. Yeah. So it actually affects you completely differently because it's not going through your digestive system. I I was. And then I started drinking coffee more regularly and stopped being as sensitive to it. But I was extremely sensitive to coffee for a really long time. Yeah. And like, it definitely, like, the caffeine made me like crazy, and like my stomach, and it was just like a mess. So you do also have to use a very specific type of coffee when you do a coffee enema. You have to do, first of all, you have to make sure you get a coffee that is mold free. And if you're just looking it up on Amazon, you'll want to look at Gerson approved. That's Gerson, because it's Gerson therapy that does, that's really big into coffee enemas, and they do use that for like healing cancer. So Gerson approved coffee, which is like roasted in a specific way, it's mold free. And then a lot of people actually use, so medium roast is good, but a lot of people will use this, like, it's a roast that almost looks like blonde. Like, it doesn't look like coffee. It looks like, like blonde, almost like golden. So some people use that because it's higher in the polytimic acid, I believe it's called. And that's actually what's kind of giving you the benefit. But also keep in mind, when you're putting it in your butt versus it going through your digestive system, it's going straight to your bloodstream, straight into your liver, and then coming back out. So it's not going through everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why it'll affect you differently. And for me, like, I find it very energizing. Typically, you know, I still will feel energized, but it doesn't give me that like jittery, like caffeine effect. It just, I'll feel energized after the fact. Although some people do have herc symptoms with that as well. So they have like the die-off symptoms, especially if you're very toxic. So I feel like for you, it probably wouldn't be as bad. I might be wrong, just because I know you've done a lot of healing work. So if you've already done a lot of healing work, typically it's not as intense, the die-off symptoms. But if you're like kind of really at the beginning of things, you haven't, you know, eliminated foods that you're sensitive to, and you haven't done a lot of healing work, then the die-off symptoms can be intense. You know, you could get really bad headaches, and you do have to make sure that you are, like Gerson recommends that you do a lot of like juicing when you're doing coffee enemas regularly, to make sure that you're keeping up your mineral content. Personally, I like a supplement by Biomatrix that's support minerals, that has really good mineral content. You could drink coconut water, which obviously does have sugars, so it will feed the candida a little bit. But yeah, at the same time, like, you always have to weigh the cost versus benefit. So like, if drinking some coconut water is going to help, or you could just drink like water with pink salt, and yeah, make sure that you're getting enough sodium, take the mineral supplement. But anyway, cost versus benefit, right? So if drinking some coconut water is going to help replenish your body and feed your candida a little bit, it's okay to do it sometimes, considering how much the coffee enema flushes out candida. So
Cool. That's so interesting.
yeah.
I did have one last question. I'm so grateful for your time. You've been so kind.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of different types of doctors, but one of them I've been seeing is an herbalist, and they do everything in tinctures. So I take several tinctures every day with the Candida and SIBO, and not only do all the fermented foods. Would the tincture alcohol be enough to kind of offset things?
So there are alcohol-free tinctures. I wouldn't worry too much about that, because typically, and I don't know what tinctures you're taking, but typically the herbs in the tinctures are they're usually kind of killing off the candida or whatever. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. You could check and see if there are alcohol-free versions of the tinctures that you're taking. But usually the herbal content in there kind of outweighs the alcohol effect, if that makes sense. But again, I don't know exactly what tinctures you're taking, so.
Right. Cool. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anything else?
I think I'm good.
Okay, awesome. Well, on that note, I will put a link here to Gut Punch. I'll put that in the comments. And if you're watching the recording, you can always shoot me an email, a message. It's Ethereal Beings Wellness, pretty much everywhere. My email address is hpatton@thepaleoballerina.com. And then if you want to get into Gut Punch, we will be starting it at the end of the month. So I think right around the beginning of December, probably, because I want to wait till after Thanksgiving. But definitely, if you take advantage of it in the next 5 days, there's the payment plan option that I offered. That's going to be at the reduced rate. Yeah, so it's a good time to get in on it. So that is just paypal.me/harmonypattonfdnp/444. So paypal.me. Okay, so I sent that in the chat as well. And again, I'm not sure if you guys can see the chat when you're watching the recording. I'm not sure, but it's there just in case. I guess I should have put www. Oh, right. So there's the payment plan option, but also the you also get the 30-minute private call with me in addition. That's an extra bonus for you guys watching the masterclass. So have a great one. I hope you have an amazing weekend, a great Friday. I hope you found this helpful, and see you guys next time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.